welcome to the very first full video review of Skate-editquette, the show where I take DVD and VHS era skate films and rate every section on a 5-point scale. Why am I doing this, you may ask? Because I'm an old head, and I have opinions that I have to let everybody know. And oh, by the way, I've made 7 skate videos and countless edits that no one's ever watched, so I think that's enough credibility on my end. To begin, I'm covering the 2003 video from 50/50 known as Juice. It was directed by V3000, and this video, as far as I know, is the only team video the company has ever made. 50/50 was also still on top of the game, but there was a shift occurring in the frame industry. Since the emergence of the universal frame system, a model developed by Lawrence Ingram, 50/50 and Solomon Skates, other companies began to grow in popularity. While 50/50 still had a pretty stacked team, you could tell there were some changes going on behind the scenes. I don't want to say it was shrinkage or anything like that, but it appeared like the team was getting smaller and smaller and the options on frames, their varieties, were starting to wane. Not to say that they weren't innovative at the time. They had created the balance frame system and the juice block system, so they definitely weren't stagnant. But I think at this time, when you have competition from companies that have bigger backing behind them, like Kaiser and Ground Control, you can only do so much. So I feel like this video is more of a statement from the company saying, we're in it for the long haul. And they could pretty much back it up with the roster of skaters that they had. Finding information on V3000 is freaking tough. I mean, it doesn't help that his nickname sounds like a camera. It's almost impossible to find anything on him. I do know this is the follow-up to his 2001 Dynateam video, which was well received. He was also working on the skate magazine Life Plus at the time, which only lasted 6 issues. Can his first full-length video in 2 years hold up to his previous work? Let's fire up this puppy and see how it all shakes out. I like the way the video opens up with a history lesson about the company. They showcase a lot of early products and advertisement throughout the years. It's a very nice touch. And as you're watching this section of the video, you get this nostalgic boot to the head to recall that Dominic Sagona and John Elliott were on the 50/50 team. And they had their own frames. That's how influential the company was. They were the aftermarket frame company. So the introduction starts off with what can best be described as an instrumental hip-hop beat, followed by quick cuts to titles and shots of the skaters who will have sections later, and then it immediately transitions into the amateur section. The thing that really bugs me about the intro section, not that it's bad or anything, but V, for whatever reason, feels the necessity to match the music with jump cuts. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It can be done well. But when you have a heavy bass beat like what this intro has, sometimes it's just a little off-putting. The AMs here are a solid list. Charlie Ashby, Chris Majette, a young Cameron Card, and Chris Cheshire, who is still in his baggy period. People seem to forget that Chris Majette was a good skater in his own right. I mean, when most people think of Chris Majette, they think of the filmer of the Philadelphia scene that brought us the Kelsos and Kilgore and Cheshire. But he did ride for Dyna and 50/50, so he must have had some skill. The tricks in this section are solid. They are a variety of switch-ups, transfers, and disaster grinds. The 4 amps featured here do a nice job showing off a variety of technical tricks and stunts. My favorite trick is Card's in-spin mono-roll to back royale to transfer soul. Honorable mentions go to Ashby's back farb to revert drop on a gnarly rail, and Cheshire's true top soyale to outspin top soul revert. I give this section 2 stars out of 5. It really was quick, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but the way this is all divvied up, it doesn't really work, because you have the first part, which is all the pros and their B-roll. So, like, here's a preview of the people that are going to have the bigger sections, and then we just, without any real transition, go into the 4 vignettes of our AMs. And the AM parts suffer from a lack of spot variety. Ashby is the biggest culprit. it looks like he skated his section in a weekend, and that doesn't really help a whole lot. Secondly, and this is my bigger thing, 50/50 was renowned for its durability in their frames, and there's not a single massive gap in this section. I know you want to show how well your frames slide on grinds and stuff like that, but if you're trying to establish your credibility as a durable frame, you kind of need a couple of massive stair gaps to, bolster that, and it just really didn't happen here. Next up is the leadoff section with Randy Spicer, in which there is really no transition. We go from looking at Cheshire doing his worst Rocky Balboa impression to suddenly being whiplashed into Spicer's part. This section is critical for Randy at this point in his career, because you really got to think about what he's doing at this point. He's partial owner of Second Regime Wheels. He has just launched a boot company with Louis Zamora called Deshi. It has the backing of Power Slide. So if I'm him in this instance, I'm doing everything that I can to show off just how good these skates are. And he does do a solid job here showing off that he still has skills, even though he's later on in his career. And we're going to see that right now. One thing of note, many people forget that Deshi pulled a couple of major coups by bringing in Chris Farmer and Ian McLeod into their inaugural team. That team is a pretty good mix of new and old school skaters. However, the skate was plagued with problems and the company did not last very long. Now, I was an early adopter of the DK Deshi boot. I thought it was a good idea. I thought it had a lot of potential, but the problem was there was a frame bolt issue. And I went through 3 boots before I just said screw it and I jumped to remedies. But the main problem that I had with them was the frame bolt in the back near the heel would always end up ripping right through the boot itself. And it happened to me on multiple occasions. Now granted, Deshi did replace the first 2 pairs of skates, but the problem still remained because carbon fiber was still pretty expensive. It still is today, but they didn't really want to use that for the skate, which would have made it way better, but they didn't. So they went with like this compressed cardboard that really just couldn't handle the pressure. I mean, nowadays the boot is been transmogrified into by Power Slide into a USD boot, but back then it just didn't really handle it very well. But we're not here to talk about the boot. We're here to talk about Spicer skating, so let's really get into it now. This section is vintage Randy Spicer. He laces some of his signature tricks like kind grinds, true Mizus, and front farves. On top of that, he's still showing signs of evolution. He mixes in a number of disaster grinds and step-over switch-ups. Even though he's considered an elder statesman at this point, he puts together a section of technical and banger tricks. My favorite trick is his sole on a rail to true spin top sole transfer onto a ledge. His ender, which is an alley-oop sole to in-spin front royale transfer to 270 revert, is an awesome trick to wrap up your section. However, Randy's section suffers the same fate as Charlie Ashby's. It looks like it was rushed. Except maybe he took a week to film his section instead of a day or 2 like Charlie's. It does incorporate a skating no-no of the time, which is showing park skating. A practice that was greatly shunned and vehemently discouraged, but it is in here, so kudos to them. This section earns 3 stars from me. Randy's in the twilight of his career. He's got a lot of business stuff to take care of, so I'm pretty sure his skating just couldn't be as often as he'd like. But he still does a great job of landing some of his classic tricks and integrating some new stuff. But, when you're a busy businessman, as Randy was at the time, you're just too occupied with getting things done. But, again, still holds his own. Interesting to note that the song in this section led to a major music right issue for rollerblading. The band known as The Faint were not happy to hear their music in a rollerblading video, as members of the band were skateboarders. They saw Spizer's part on TV and had not given permission to use the music. Speaking as a skate editor and a scholar who talks about intellectual property rights in classes, it kind of sucks to see this happen, but you know, it's one of those things where you really got to question who was the person that gave them authorization to put that on TV, because you're pretty much letting the cat out of the bag, because most people tend to forget that skate videos back then were pretty niche. You're not going to make a lot in sales, and so pirating music to put in your video was a common practice. I mean, YouTube didn't exist, and if you actually had the means to call the artist or the record label to get permission, I mean, there's probably going to be some sort of steep licensing fee attached to it, and most couldn't afford it. In fact, the only two groups that I knew who've ever done it for a rollerblading video, Video Groove is one, Mind Game the other. So yeah, it sucks that there was a spat about this, and from my understanding, they pretty much put a cease and desist order, The Faint to 50/50 about this video, so you know, any profits that they were going to hopefully get pretty much were gone. But it kind of sucks, but it was also a symptom of the time. Then before you know it, we're at Dustin Holleran's section with him in his apartment playing Dreamcast. Now this is a trend I'm starting to notice within this video. It really doesn't give you room to breathe. And you might as well just get accustomed to whiplash, because that's what you're going to get when there's no transition between sections and things just happen. Dustin comes out swinging in this section. He's got big gaps, tech tricks, disaster grinds, and switch-ups. All of it is to a medley of classic hip-hop beats. This is a really solid section. Of all the sections in this video, Dustin Holleran's sticks out the most to me. I mean, he had just made his name in VG16 with Mike Murda Johnson, and he's had some clips in Steal This Video, Uncloned, Sell Your Soul to Roll, and it just seems like he's just hungry. He wants to just nail everything to the best of his ability. This one feels the most complete, and it took time and effort to do. Out of the entire section, my favorite trick is his fence stall to disaster back royale, because it told such a good story, and his ender is just too damn crazy. It's a disaster soul down what looks like to be a 15 stair with very little room for error. Are you kidding me? This section earns 4.5 stars from me. This is by far the best part of the entire video. Holleran's putting in work, there's no filler here, and it's showing off all of his versatility. I would give it 5 stars, but the tonal whiplash at the beginning is kind of just, my head. Plus, Dustin always seemed to be overshadowed by Murda, and it's a shame because of how damn good he is. Murda even admitted on the Jump Street podcast that he thought Dustin was way better than him, which is very high praise. I still maintain that Holleran should have had a pro boot at some point in his career, but it just never happened. He and Walt Austin were both well deserving. I think it just sucks that Dustin totally hates rollerblading right now. He gave his body for this game and is left miserable. Up next is a twofer with John Julio and Rashard Johnson sharing a section. And I know people are going to get upset with me on this rule, but this is how I play it. If there are 2 people sharing a song, you're sharing a section. John leads off the section showing a mix of his old school tricks and what would become his signature style moving forward. There are a lot of fast plans to grinds, dark side grinds, and wall rides in this section, showing evidence that he still has skills as the elder statesman of rollerblading. We even get a sidewalk in this section. You know, that trick he invented that everybody gives him guff for. Just saying that about John Julio is so weird to me now. I mean, this video is 20 years old and he's still doing it. In fact, the only 2 people who are active in this entire video today are Julio and Chris Farmer. I mean, everybody else has matured and moved on. Hell, even Randy Spicer is a pro fisher now. Then, before you can blink, Rashard is on your screen, and holy cow, talk about power skating! This man is spinning and switching up on everything he can find. There are some stunts here that are awe-inspiring, but also scary as shit. His 450 front royale looks like he's practicing his top turnbuckle wrestling moves. Christ! There is a lot of technical stuff happening in this part, and it suffers from the lack of spot variety. It's plagued with multiple clips on a spot, and most of those spots are places where he frequently kills it to begin with. Most of the tricks Richard pulls here, I wouldn't even attempt on my P-rail. But that lack of variety kind of kills this part for me. My overall rating for the Julio Richard section is 3.5 stars. I mean, you can tell they're putting in some effort. John more so than Richard because of the lack of spot variety, but both guys are still killing it. John's soul to wall tap the top sole was my favorite trick of his, and that nasty fall prior to landing his ender still looks gnarly. So major props for getting that done. Richard's back royale down that drop rail is just too crazy to ignore. And then his ender still scares me every time I watch it. A 540 over a wall, a staircase, and into the street? That ending trick by Richard Johnson, utterly insane, no doubt. It actually boosted up the rating of this by 0.5 star. But it's also emblematic of the time. Breakneck tech is the thing to do. And Richard does it well. He's got damn good style, but the problem with him in this section is the same thing I've been talking about the entire video. Lack of spot variety. It just kind of looks rushed. It's damn good skating, but it's in like 6 places, and it just kind of overall kills the vibe. I mean, you're in Southern California. You've got all the places you could ever want to skate in pretty good weather. Just wish you used it a little bit better. After a transition that goes longer than 0.5 second, it's now for the final section, and it's Chris Farmer closing this video down. At this point in time, Chris Farmer is on top of the rollerblading world. I mean, after his out of the blue section in VG19, followed by his 2 sections in Words from Mind Game, holy cow, this dude was just everywhere. His skating was so popular and his style choices so admired that the next thing you knew, everybody is wearing the baggiest of baggy clothes, looking just like a Chris Farmer clone. But this section is an early indication of his evolution from spinning tech tricks to the more creative stuff he would come to be known for. You can see how his time with Dustin Latimer during the filming of Words was creeping into his skating at this point. He's doing more unorthodox stuff here, but there is still some tech switch-ups. What is funny about this period of Chris Farmer is that this is the nascent movement of what he would become. He just switched from rollerblade to deshi, a great marketing move by Randy and Louis Zamora by the way, to christen their boot company. He had yet to start wearing tight clothes and he was still anti-rocker before the Mook frames were released. You'd have thought this would have been the section where people would really start to hate on Chris Farmer's change in style, but because of all the incidents with the feint, just wasn't meant to be. In fact, most people didn't start hating Farmer's new change in direction until Straight Jacket, KFC's 3rd video. Which, that's one of those things that we had to remember at the time. We didn't have social media, and all we got were these sections, which would, come into videos every 6 months or so. So we didn't see the subtle changes, we just saw the big jumps. And I really think that did a disservice to Farmer, because this video could have been that introduction, it could have been an easier change, because if you really compare how he was skating in VG19 to what would then happen in Straight Jacket, it's a stark difference. And this right here, if it would have gotten more hands and seen by more eyes, I think it would have mitigated the hate. You can tell that Chris Farmer's section was filmed over the course of something like a week or two because he was in the same spots the other team members skated. Most of it appears to be in Southern California, but it isn't all the same places. It looks as though he got out to some famous spots and did his thing. But he is also trying out his new stuff here as well, which does help with the variety. My rating for Farmer's section here is 4 stars. It is a good mix of classic farmer from VG19 and the new direction that he's going, that he hasn't totally evolved into yet. So it does a good serviceable job of showcasing what Deshi skates were all about, because that boot brand was about to launch and he was one of the marquee names attached to it. So it does a good job. It's just a pity that this didn't get out to everybody like it could have. My favorite trick of Chris's was his Machio up a rail to mute grab the top sole down a rail. His ender, on the other hand, was just stupid. Sole on ledge to transfer top sole down a rail? Who even thinks of something like that? Plus he made it look so smooth. That's just criminal! Wrap it up with a scroll of some of the slowest credits ever put to a skate video, and there's your film. My overall grade for Juice is a C. It's a good film, but it suffers from a couple of major flaws. One, it's pretty short. It's only 20 minutes, and at the time when it was released in 2002, I'm a poor undergrad. I don't have money to spend, and when I found out that it was only 20 minutes long, I decided I wasn't going to buy it. I'm sorry. I'm looking for a little bit more in terms of volume of skating when I made my video purchases back then. The best sections for me, hands down, Hollerin', doing all that crazy stuff that he was known for at the time. I mean, showing off just how hungry he was. I mean, doing some really scary stuff that would, break most of us to pieces. And Chris Farmer's section's also pretty solid. It's a good mix of where he was to where he was going. And it's kind of amazing that, if I'm not mistaken, he said in a podcast interview that he filmed that section over the course of like a Christmas break when he came down from Minnesota to Southern California. So that's pretty impressive. Biggest con for this is just the fact that the intro felt so rushed, but that's also a problem symptomatic of the entire video. It suffers from the greatest flaw, which is same spot syndrome. There's a lot of similar spots. Richard, Ashby, they hit multiple tricks on the same thing, which doesn't help. And when some of that's happening in multiple sections, like, it's cool that the team went out to a spot and skated, but when there's not a whole lot of that variety throughout, it's definitely going to, for me, kill the vibe. Now, I'm also not a fan of just how there's little transition in the way between sections. I really don't know, like, if this was a rush project by V3000, but it had a lot of potential. There's good quality skating here, but part of what you're trying to do as a video editor or director is you're trying to capture certain aspects of skating that should highlight what the team or your product's doing. Like, just as an example, when those suspension frames, physics, came out, they highlighted the living daylights out of the fact that they were suspension and they could take a lot of shock. 50/50 is known as being a durable frame, so where are the tricks that would demonstrate this? Yes, they're doing some pretty big hammers in this, but like, there's a lack in gaps that really hurt the overall presentation. I don't think they played to their strengths with that, which is kind of a shame. But overall, solid video, just kind of short. And that's kind of what kills it. Because, again, those lack of spots and variety, but a solid team raises the bar a bit. So it's a bit of a mixed bag, but it's a solid watch. You can see it on YouTube. Enjoy it. I know I did. So if you have a video from this era you'd like to nominate, show me in the comments below. Maybe I'll look at it, maybe I won't. I won't tell you until the next review comes up. But you now have the opportunity to let me know down below. So until next time, kids, toodles.